had a hole in their backside was well aware of the Krays. You know, they were legendary and have been since their incarceration. But I, the same as everyone else, never ever thought I would meet them or become very close friends with them. You know, they were like, in my stupidity, I looked at them as like godlike creatures. You know what I mean? The same as every other young man that was walking about, especially any young man who had crime involved in their life. You know, they were the mentors. Yeah. And what happened was I was going out with a lady at the time that was an identical twin, and they were rappers. And I had a big security company where there wasn't so many security companies in London then, and I suppose I had one of the biggest, where I had all the big contracts, all the nightclubs. This was before like Acid and all that came in, you know, all the clubs and that I was doing. And the two twins that I was connected with, they'd done a record called They Took the Rap, and it was about the Krays twins. And I was going to go and give whatever money it made to them. And they went and done their own work and found out who Dave Courtney was, and he had like a little army working for him, and they wanted to see me as well. So I went down to Maidstone with Tony Lambriano, who Reggie asked me to pick up and take down there. And after that, we did get on very, very well. I was a bit in awe as a young man. And I then carried on seeing him about twice a week for 20 odd years. You know what I mean? I ended up running Frankie Fraser down to see him. I organised and initiated a most memorable meeting where I brought Charlie Richardson down to meet Reggie Kray, and the last time they sort of seen each other, they was like, you know. You're blinded by the reputation, yeah, and the myth to reality. Yeah, you're blinded by, you know, you actually can't believe you're in the same room as one of the Krays twins. You forget to actually look at the calibre of the man. Yeah, you're like meeting Michael Jackson. You're like, before you realise, you know, he's actually a nonce. You understand what I mean? I was blinded by the reputation, and it took a good few years for me to actually fall into the fact that, you know, they weren't, in today's world, as naughty as they were then. You know what I mean? I've said before, it's easy to run Bethnal Green when there was only 15,000 people in Bethnal Green. And all of them spoke and understood English very well. Don't forget, once you've been incarcerated for that long, your brain goes silly, and he tried to keep himself active with ideas of business, but they were scatterbrained ideas, you know, they were out there, you know what I mean? You know, he'd ring me up one day and say, Dave, I've had a great idea. I want you to get in touch with the Quaker Oaks people, and I've got a good advert for porridge, and I want them to film me in here training for 30 seconds, and then I can turn around to the camera and go, 30 years of porridge done me no harm. He said, I want you to go and sell that and get me £1 million, you know, and all sorts of things, you know. And there was people like the first lottery winner gave him £100,000, and he wanted to open up a Kray twin old people's home, you know, and they done the ordinary things that everyone does, the Kray twin t-shirts and the mugs and the songs and bits and pieces, you know what I mean? They done all them, but they had these airbrained ideas of grandeur where none of them had two bob, none of them had any business sense, none of them had any common sense, none of them had any grip on reality at all. They'd been in prison for, you know, 20 or 30 years, you know. When they went to prison, people were earning £11 a week, you know, and you got your hair cut for 10 bob. You know, now I'm telling him I had to go and spend 80 quid to get my missus' hair cut. He couldn't get his head round it. You know, I remember him saying to me, what the fuck is a Kentucky Fried Chicken? What is that? You know, Dave, there's someone coming here with blue hair and a drawing pin in his nose. And he couldn't get he'd lost all, you know, the fastest car in the world at the time, done nearly 100 mile an hour. There weren't no M25. The Cortina Mark 1 had just come out. You understand what I mean? He's no, you know, if you try and tell him it's 6 quid for a gallon of petrol, he couldn't get his head round it. He could buy a car for 6 quid. They were frozen in time in the 60s, and I'm afraid that happens to anyone that goes to prison. Anyone. me included. You come out thinking everything's exactly the same as it was, and it's not. They had delusions of grandeur that they were actually waiting to come out and then become the next Steve McQueen, or they actually genuinely believed, because of the amount of fan mail that they got, they genuinely believed they were going to come out and just live off their fame and live in mansions, and when in reality they had nothing. I had to buy his trainers or his pencils, and they had nothing. In reality, what else did they have? They only had their infamousy. And I don't know if you can go and check up on with financial people to go and find out how much they earned with their books. It wasn't a lot of money at all. You know what I mean? They all died completely skint. Yeah, they helped me and advised me how to sort of write my books. They asked me to do a lot of books I'd done where I was commenting on the rest of the so-called underworld, and they wanted me to be the one to be the voice piece who spoke about them, and Lenny McLean and Roy Shaw and Tony Ambriano, and I was quite honoured by that. And because at the time there was a thing of freedom of the press, before you can't glamorise crime now, but the freedom of the press was, they found us very interesting. Well, all these gangsters that I'm not saying I was anything like or could ever be one, but they'd spent their whole life going, no pictures, no comments, collar up in the shadows. We're now expected to write books and go, dun. Well, I was better at that than they were. So they wrapped me in cotton wool and used me as Dave would get through on writing the magazines and getting through, and then he'd drag us up. It's a bit like we all chipped in some money to pay for me to get in the pictures, and then I popped the fire door open and dragged everyone in for nothing. Well, that was my plan, and so I got the job in the front magazine, and then I got Reggie his own column and Charlie Bronson his own column in a magazine, and I got me, Freddie and Tony doing worldwide adverts for pink shirts, and was all doing all these documentaries, it was a very exciting time, and they were, like I said, anyone earning money off their criminal past owes it to the Krays, because their name kept it all romantic and mythical, yeah? But the truth, I'm afraid, nothing is as big as a myth, as I've said a million times before, and they definitely wasn't. And their misconception of real life genuinely had them believing they were megastars, yeah? And where people at the beginning of the sentence were a bit with them because they were genuinely frightened of them, they had forgotten that they were now 75 years old, and they're talking to them like that way because they're both well-known, very small little homosexuals, and they're 70 odd years old, so people were talking to them nicely because they're old, not because they were frightened. You know what I mean? Like Frankie Fraser fell into the trap of believing that he was still scary, and at 74 went on the cover of his book and went, "Arr." You know what I mean? It's pathetic, it's sad, do you understand what I mean? All they ever said about the David Bailey photographs was, look who was on the next page, and did you see who we were in there with? And we're all on the same level of stardom. And I didn't want to go and pop their bubble and ruin anything that kept them happy. They're locked up in prison, and anything that's going to keep them smiling, it's my job as their friend to bolster it along. But they genuinely believed that they were, Michael Caine, John Lennon, George. They genuinely believed that, and I didn't want to go to them, oh, stop it. So you feed them, and because no one ever went, oh, shut up, you fucking fool.